The mountain air was thin and unforgiving that October afternoon when Marcus Chen heard the cry, a sound so faint it could have been the wind whistling through the pines. But something in his gut told him it wasn't. As a single father who'd learned to trust his instincts through years of midnight fevers and scraped knees, he couldn't ignore it. His daughter Emma was safe at her grandmother's house for the weekend, giving him this rare solo hiking trip. He'd planned to clear his head, to breathe away the exhaustion of double shifts at the diner and the constant worry about making rent. Instead, he found himself running toward that desperate sound, his worn boots slipping on loose gravel as he left the marked trail behind. What he discovered 20 yards down a steep embankment would change everything. A woman lay crumpled against a boulder, her expensive hiking gear torn and muddied, blood seeping from a gash on her temple. Her face was pale as the clouds gathering overhead, and her breathing came in shallow gasps. Marcus didn't think, he simply acted. He'd taken a wilderness first aid course years ago when Emma was born, back when he and his ex-wife still had dreams of family camping trips that never materialized. Now, kneeling beside this stranger, those lessons flooded back. "Hey, can you hear me? I'm Marcus. I'm going to help you." His voice was steady despite his racing heart. The woman's eyelids fluttered, revealing hazel eyes clouded with pain and confusion. "Fell," she whispered. "Can't, my leg." Marcus assessed quickly. Her left leg was bent at an unnatural angle, likely broken. The head wound looked worse than it probably was. Head injuries always bled dramatically, but combined with possible internal injuries and the temperature dropping fast, she was in serious danger. His phone showed no signal this deep in the mountains. He had maybe 2 hours of daylight left. "I need to stabilize you and get you out of here," he said, already shrugging off his backpack. He had an emergency blanket, some rope, his water bottle, and the sandwich he'd packed. Not much, but it would have to do. Working with practiced efficiency born from years of solving problems with limited resources, Marcus fashioned a splint from fallen branches in his belt. Every whimper of pain from the woman cut through him, but he couldn't stop. When he wrapped her in the emergency blanket, he noticed her hands. They were soft, well manicured, the hands of someone who'd never struggled the way he had. Her watch alone probably cost more than his monthly salary. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to keep her conscious as he worked. "Catherine," she managed. Catherine Westfield. The name meant nothing to him. Marcus didn't have time for news or celebrity gossip between raising Emma, working, and trying to keep their tiny apartment from falling apart. He hoisted Catherine onto his back in a rescue carry, her small frame feeling impossibly fragile against him. The climb back to the trail was brutal. His legs burned, his lungs screamed, but he thought of Emma. What if this was her out here someday, hurt and scared? He'd want someone to fight for her the way he was fighting for this stranger. Halfway up, Catherine mumbled something delirious about meetings and contracts, about letting people down. Marcus murmured reassurances he wasn't sure she could hear. When they finally reached the main trail, the sun was setting in brilliant oranges and purples, beautiful and terrible in its warning. He had 3 miles back to the ranger station. He walked them all, Catherine drifting in and out of consciousness against his shoulders. The helicopter came an hour after they reached the station, its searchlight cutting through the darkness like salvation. Paramedics swarmed Catherine, and Marcus finally let himself collapse against the station wall, every muscle trembling. A paramedic checked him for shock and injuries, praising his first aid work. Someone pressed hot coffee into his hands. "You saved her life," the ranger said. Another hour in hypothermia would have gotten her, if not the injuries. Marcus just nodded, too exhausted for words. They asked for his contact information, and he scribbled down his number, assuming it was just procedure. As the helicopter lifted off into the night, Catherine's pale face visible through the window, he felt oddly empty. He'd done what anyone would do, what was right. Tomorrow he'd go back to real life, to Emma's school fees he couldn't quite afford, to the car that needed repairs, to the constant juggling act that was his existence. 3 weeks passed. Marcus had almost forgotten about Catherine Westfield, buried as he was in Emma's science project and picking up extra shifts. When the letter came to his apartment, delivered by courier, no less, he opened it with grease-stained hands during his lunch break. The law firm's letterhead meant nothing to him, but the words inside made him read it 3 times to be sure he wasn't hallucinating from exhaustion. Catherine Westfield wasn't just wealthy. She was the CEO and majority shareholder of Westfield Industries, a technology conglomerate worth billions. The woman he'd carried down a mountain controlled an empire that employed 50,000 people. And she wanted to thank him. The meeting was set for the following Saturday at a downtown office that made Marcus feel like he'd walked onto a movie set. Catherine Westfield sat behind a massive desk, her leg in a cast but her presence commanding despite it. She looked different, polished, powerful, almost unrecognizable from the broken woman on the mountain. But when she smiled, he saw the same person. "Mr. Chen," she said, standing with the help of a crutch to shake his hand. "I owe you my life." Anyone would have done the same, Marcus said automatically. But they didn't. "You did." Catherine gestured for him to sit. "I've spent the last 3 weeks learning everything about you. I hope you don't find that invasive, but I needed to understand who saved me. A single father working 60-hour weeks. A man who volunteers at his daughter's school despite having no free time. Someone who, when presented with a stranger in need, didn't hesitate." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what was right. That's exactly why I want to help you," Catherine said. "Not as repayment, you can't repay a life, but as investment in the kind of person the world needs more of. I'm offering you a position at Westfield Industries. We need someone like you in our community outreach division. The salary is $200,000 a year, full benefits, flexible hours so you can be there for Emma. I've also established a trust fund for her education." Marcus's world tilted. I can't accept that. It's too much." "Is it?" Catherine leaned forward. "Marcus, you gave me back my life. I have a daughter too, Alexandra. She's 16. When I was lying on that mountain, all I could think about was never seeing her again, never fixing the relationship I damaged by working too much, by prioritizing business over being present. You gave me the chance to change that. You gave me tomorrow." Tears burned Marcus's eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Catherine said softly. "Let me give you and Emma the stability you deserve. Let me invest in more tomorrows for both of you." 6 months later, Marcus stood in the backyard of the modest but comfortable house Catherine had helped him buy, watching Emma play with Alexandra. The teenagers had become unlikely friends, bridging the gap between their worlds with the easy grace of youth. Catherine joined him, walking without the crutch now. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly. "For all of this. But mostly for trusting me to be more than my circumstances." Catherine smiled. "You taught me something on that mountain, Marcus. True wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the moments that matter, in the hands that reach out when someone falls, in the hearts brave enough to carry strangers to safety. You were rich long before we met. I'm just lucky enough now to call you friend." As the sunset painted the sky in the same oranges and purples from that October evening, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: peace. Not because his struggles had vanished, they hadn't entirely, but because he'd learned that kindness, given freely without expectation, had a power that transcended any balance sheet. Sometimes saving someone else's life meant saving your own.